All right, so President Cyril Ramaphosa, of course, last night indicating or announcing that public schools will close from July the 27th and reopen, as I said, from August the 24th. However, grade 12 pupils and their teachers would close only for 1 week, returning to school on August the 3rd, while grade 7 pupils would return to school in 2 weeks. That's on August the 10th. So the Democratic Alliance over the past few hours now says it's heading to court to challenge this decision as it perpetuates what it says is inequality. But researchers at the University of Johannesburg and the Human Sciences Research Council found a large majority of people, in fact about 60% of adults, were opposed to the reopening of schools. Professor Narnia Bohler-Muller from the Human Sciences Research Council now joins me via Skype. Prof, a very good evening to you. Thanks indeed for your time. So 60% of adults basically did not want schools to reopen. Let's start with how you carried out the survey.
Thanks for having me. So it's the second round of a series of surveys that we're doing. So the first was from the middle of April to the middle of May. And we thought that so much has changed during this lockdown period. We'd have the second round of the survey. And as we were looking at what was happening around us, we realized maybe we should take a look at what the preliminary results were for schools. And that was from the 3rd to the 17th of July. So it's a data-free platform called Moya. And it's a survey that was filled in by just over 2,500 respondents, but weighted to be nationally representative. So it's a nationally representative survey. And we wanted to ensure that we could get evidence out there to assist government in making its decision around the closing or the opening of schools. I'm not sure if there was a direct correlation to that and what the president announced last night.
Yeah.
But it was a good thing, I think, to just let people know what the feeling was on the ground.
Prof, I guess the majority of those who participated then in that survey were concerned about the rising number of COVID-19 infections in schools, whether they had been affected or whether it was learners or teachers. That was the cause for concern for them.
I think that was the cause for concern for them. We didn't ask a direct question as to why they did not want schools to reopen, but we did look at some factors, and one of the determinants or factors was income. So we found that very low-income households under 20,000 Rand per annum were far less in favor, 84% in fact opposed to the schools opening, less in favor of the schools reopening. And this gave us a very clear idea that it was in fact possibly a class distinction that we were seeing in the data. And of course, if you live in areas where schools are not well equipped, where they're not ready to take on learners, you certainly don't want your child to go back to school.
Yeah.
And that seems to be one of the correlations, yes.
Just looking at the president's decision last night, I mean, does it not expose the inequalities in the country's education system, where learners in the public system will find themselves again on the back foot because there's still no clarity on how they'll be supported over this closed period, whereas with private schools, it seems sufficient online learning has been ongoing?
Well, you know, there's always been that inequality. It's not new. And we need to also look at inequality within the public school system itself. So if you have children from well-to-do families going to school, continuing to learn, and children from poorer families not going to school, that would also perpetuate inequality. So it depends on your perspective, obviously. And there are plans in place for children to learn at home, including television and radio educational programs.
Yeah.
So it's not ideal, but the equality has always been there, and it can be exacerbated in other ways as well.
Just before we wrap up, Prof, I mean, what's interesting in your survey, you looked at political party affiliation, which was one of the variables, and about 55% of the DA supporters wanted schools to remain closed. What do you make of this in light of now the DA's bid to go to court to challenge the president's decision to close schools?
Well, I'm not sure. You know, it's the party leadership that's obviously decided this, and the DA supporters may not necessarily agree with this decision to go to court. I'm not sure if it's only the Western Cape or if it's the DA nationally. But people are afraid of the virus. They're afraid of the consequences of the virus. Mm-hmm. And they certainly don't want their children's lives or their own lives or those of anyone else. I mean, it's a sense of social solidarity in a sense, to be put at risk. And what was very interesting then, tied up to the class issue, was that 64% of EFF supporters were not in favour of opening the schools.
Prof, thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening. I'm afraid we've run out of time. Professor Narnia Bohler-Muller from the Human Sciences Research Council. Time for sport.